Hi, this is Shauna, the CEO and founder of Fuel Talent. One of the things I have loved most in my 25-year recruiting career has always been the stories that people tell. Stories of leadership, career choices, company ideas, and team building. My inspiration for starting the What Fuels You podcast came from being curious about people's lives and wanting to help share their stories. What path brought them to this place? What decisions did they make that led to failures and successes? Who influenced those decisions, and what lessons were learned along the way? I hope you enjoy the What Fuels You podcast. On today's What Fuels You episode, I will be talking with Chad Robbins, the CEO and co-founder of Adaptive Biotechnologies, which he founded with his brother Harlan in 2009. Since that time, Adaptive has received over $400 million in funding as it drives groundbreaking research in cancer and other immune-mediated diseases. Chad has been named on the 40 Under 40 list and was a finalist for the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year. He's a husband, a father, an active board member, and an overall ass-kicking friend. So welcome, Chad. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me, Shauna.
Yeah, I'm super psyched to do this. Okay, so we're going to start with rapid fire. So hopefully you're on point and you had your coffee. You ready?
Sure.
Okay. Favorite podcast?
Long Run by Luke Timmerman.
Favorite band?
Grateful Dead.
I knew you were going to say that. Chicago or Seattle?
Seattle.
Oh, God. Make sure your Chi-Town friends don't hear this. Dream romantic getaway with Christy?
Mykonos.
Oh, nice. You're planning that, right?
Correct.
Nice. Cuisine of choice?
French.
French cuisine?
I like French cuisine.
It's a lot of sauce. Oh, boy, now.
You know,
CEO you most admire?
Steve Jobs.
I like that. Finally, what fuels you?
Relationships.
I love that. Okay, so Chatty, I know a lot of this already, but for people who are listening to the podcast, they may or may not know that you grew up in Chicago. Tell me about the suburb. What is it most like in Seattle? Like, what was your childhood like there?
Actually, where I grew up in Wilmette, Illinois, is quite similar to Mercer Island. It's a suburb, relatively affluent, relatively homogeneous, to be frank. It was a pretty safe environment. You could ride your bikes around the street and
there was
get together
the 70s,
with friends.
the good old days.
Yeah, I guess it was the 70s and 80s. Remember, I'm a little younger than you. Remember,
so not fair. So I know I have the privilege of having known your dad, and I know your mom, and they have to me what seemed like quite the love story. So, what would it be like to be kind of a fly on the wall in your family, and you've got your brother Harlan? So what was a typical day in the house like? Was there music on?
My parents weren't actually big music lovers, but a typical day in the house, my mom always made us breakfast. My dad actually would usually leave before we got up, and for a specific reason and purpose, he would leave at 5 a.m. so that he could always be home. He always got home for dinner. He always got home to play ball on the street with us or to coach our teams. It was incredibly important to him to be very present, and he always put his family first. So that was the trade-off that he made, being a, corporate lawyer, is that he'd get up at, 4:30, be in work by 5, and then be home in time to throw a ball around.
That's amazing. And there's all sorts of things that say that kind of time with the family and time together has a direct correlation with somebody's kind of stability and how they grow up. So that's amazing. So you and Harlan are how far apart in age?
13 months.
And who's older?
Harlan is older.
So you're the baby? Do you play a role? I mean, now you're the CEO. So what's the dynamic there?
It's a dynamic that's obviously carried through from childhood. And I think what's really interesting about us and why it works is we bring very different skill sets to the table. We appreciate each other's skill sets. For the most part, we're both learning about each other's fields, but it does lead to some interesting dynamics in meetings. So first of all, I think in any external meeting now, I preface the meeting with saying, just so you guys know, we're brothers, because we'll talk to each other in a certain way that, first of all, no one talks to a CEO outside of a family relationship, and probably vice versa too. It can be.
Well, he's also like such a brilliant mind. It probably goes the other way too, where it's like, who's pushing back on him? You. You've got that personality that you can do that with him also and call him out. You can call each other out.
Yeah, we do. I think we call each other out. We try, you know, not to call each other out in so much in areas of expertise, but you know, how messages are delivered is really important. You know, on both fronts. But you know, I think he's in a different league in terms of innovation, and his communication has improved so drastically since we started working together. He's clear and consistent, and I told him actually the other day, I mean, it's a dangerous combination when you can not only innovate but you can communicate those ideas. And so
he does a great job of it. I mean, when he's talking, I feel like I'm understanding what he's saying. If I'm just reading about it from afar, I'm like, what? But when he does explain it, and you do a great job of explaining it. I mean, we're going to get to Adaptive later, but I want to continue to learn a little bit more about you as a kid, because I feel like we would probably have hung out. And you know, in elementary school, would people that went to school with you then, many of whom you're still friends with, have said this is definitely the guy that's going to be the CEO?
I think a lot of them would. I guess growing up, I didn't want to be a baseball player or fireman, or I wanted to be a CEO since the time I was like 11 years old. You know, I read like Forbes and Fortune, and I loved business. I loved all business and just trying to figure out how things work and how you made money and the different dynamics in different industries. And I still love that. I love kind of the range of, you know, I guess from the platform of Adaptive, I've had the ability to have exposure to all these different industries and investment opportunities and boards. And it's just, to me, that when you ask what fuels me, that it's really, I actually think that also helps me in my role as Adaptive to be able to see, you know, how people lead in different industries. And so that's, and I was like that
when
from
you're
very
curious about it. I mean, you are a curious person, and you are a relationship builder, and it's genuine. So when you're asking about what people do, you're not just making small talk. You're actually interested in leaning into how their businesses work, and that's why I love this part. I mean, this podcast thing has been super fun for me because I think there's no just kind of clear path for people. And some people have known their whole lives that they wanted to be a CEO, and others are like circumstances led them to that place. But who were the influences for you early on?
Yeah, my parents. I mean, but if you look at my dad, this ability to connect with people and to actually be interested in what they're saying. And it's not just like what you would consider the high level or important people, right? My dad was interested and developed relationships in his firm with the people in the mailroom and the shoe shine guy and the assistants. And that was really special. And it also taught me great lessons on humanity, but also this just genuine interest. I don't even like the term networking. For me, you know, I guess technically I'm always networking, but I don't consider it networking because I love it. I love people. I mean, I love hearing about what they're doing. I'm genuinely interested in what they're doing. And to me, I think that's symbiotic, synergistic, whatever you want to call it, with how I run my business, how I operate.
And if it wasn't biotech, it would be just another industry, but you'd be doing the Chad thing where you'd be building relationships, and that serves you in any industry.
Yeah, just to be clear, I mean, I call myself a mutt. I mean, I backed into or lucked into where I am now as CEO of a biotech company, but that was not clearly the design path for sure. I've been in real estate, investment banking, hedge funds, healthcare. I mean, healthcare from a health insurance perspective. Right. So all these different things. It's not that I was destined to be a biotech CEO.
Right. And so I know that you went to Cornell for undergrad and to Wharton to get your MBA. And so clearly you're bright. And so was education a value in your home?
Yeah, education was a huge value. And one of the big influencers in my life was my mom. She's been a lifelong educator. Matter of fact, has some very, very strong opinions on, you know, how schools should operate. She's been a principal and director of general studies for 25 years. But education was important in the home. And she, as much as we went to great schools, she always took it upon herself to say that she was the biggest educator. So we would write papers together. She was more on the kind of English side as opposed to the STEM side. But we would write papers together. She'd teach me how to read and write and critical thinking. And we just spent a lot of time together. And going to the right schools, which today I think is somewhat of a dated notion, but that was important in our household.
Yeah. And so would people be surprised to see that where Harlan's path took him to Fred Hutch and to become a scientist? And
another thing about my parents too, money was never the driving force for what made a good or successful person. So my brother made some choices very early on to stay in academia when he could have gone to Wall Street to some of these big quant funds and make a tremendous amount of money. And he was just really interested in finding out how he could change the world, which is actually one of the reasons that he was a theoretical physicist doing string theory, and he thought
I don't even know what that means, but I know
black
it's
holes,
impressive.
Stephen Hawking, all that
Yes.
stuff, right? And the reality is, he
love that
didn't
movie.
think that there was real practical applications of that. So he switched over to this new field called computational biology in kind of the early 2000s, or bioinformatics, where he thought he could have a bigger impact. And my parents, at a certain point, he started making some money in academia, but it was academic money. So there was
Right.
never this path. Everyone knew my brother was a genius since he was a very young age. So I don't think it surprises anyone that he has had innovative ideas, discoveries, and kind of intellectual property that I think will absolutely change how drugs are discovered and how clinicians treat patients. I don't think anyone would be surprised by that.
Right. And did you guys go to public school or private school growing up?
We went to public school.
And so were you both able to stay challenged in public school? And what did you do in your free time?
Yeah, we were challenged in different ways, right? I was
I can
always,
picture it. I can picture the whole
I mean, we
thing.
were always friends, but I was always the more social one. I had
You got moved into the other row because you were distracting your friends. That was me also.
Like our kids. I was always the social one. I was president of my class, freshman class, and it was a really big school. And I was the guy that was, organizing or knew where all the kind of social events were and the different teams and whatnot. We both played sports. He was probably a more accomplished athlete. He was actually starting running back on a big high school football team, but he was also on the debate team, the math team, and a bunch of what you would consider.
Overachiever.com.
Yeah, and I did a lot. I had a lot of extracurricular activities as well. But we were very, very different personalities in high school as we are today.
Yeah. And so you went to Cornell, and how did you choose Cornell? Because you probably had some options.
I chose Cornell. I applied early decision because the campus was beautiful and I was really into the outdoors. And they had an undergraduate kind of entrepreneurial program. It was actually.
Did you study? Is it that was the degree?
Actually, so Cornell was the business school was in the ag school because it was a state school. But yeah, I was in agricultural resource and managerial economics, which there was a entrepreneurship program in there, which our senior year we won the school-wide business plan competition and was super serious about it. Actually moved to Jackson Hole, Wyoming
That's so cool.
after my senior year in college to look at starting a business. We were a little bit before our time, but think about it as like a credit-based system for outdoor adventure luxury travel packages.
I don't think I've ever known this story. That's actually.
It's called American Beauty, name of a Grateful Dead song. But we based
and a
on
good movie.
but based on how long you'd stay, you get a certain number of credits that you could allocate in the winter towards heli skiing or ice climbing, and in the summer
interesting.
towards whitewater rafting or yoga. There was different categories of how many points you could spend.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that idea. I think that would thrive today.
It would. It's been done. I think there are a lot of things out there that mirror that, but we were a little bit ahead of our time. We were also we were pretty ambitious. We needed,
Did you
tens
raise
of millions.
capital?
No, we needed tens of millions of dollars. We had a piece of land picked out on the Snake River that had a resort designation. We were looking at potentially buying a rafting company. And, the partners I was doing it with who, were great people, but it probably wasn't the right
You were on
fit.
different pages.
Yeah,
as
we're
far
on
as
different
your
pages.
ambition.
Yeah.
And so, what did you stand for at that time? Like, where were you involved and engaged? I mean, most college kids are kind of like, where's the next party and how do I get to the next day? But I know that you're engaged in kind of the world around you. Were you like that in college?
I was always interested in the world around me. Going back to growing up, my dad was a trustee for the Village of Wilmette, and both my parents were very involved in politics. My dad probably more so than my mom, but super interested in it. Super interested in the fact that we were privileged, and with privilege comes responsibility, and that we always had a responsibility to think about how we could how we could help those less fortunate. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't say, just to be clear, I wouldn't say I was super political in college. I was definitely, pretty social. I was involved in a fraternity. I worked hard enough.
Hard enough to get into Wharton to get your MBA.
Yeah, I worked hard enough to get decent enough grades, and I was into the outdoors, right? In college, I mean, I
like those old pictures of you. Like you were like an outdoorsy guy. You're like a perfect Seattle guy.
Yeah,
I like it.
Yeah, no.
And so, did you have teachers that were kind of big influences on you, either in high school or college?
Yeah, I did. There was a series of teachers. I would say probably more on the kind of English side than particularly on the math side, that really kind of crystallized critical thinking, how I write and communicate, express myself, teaching you how to think and not what to think.
Yeah, I like that.
And so I can remember probably one teacher in high school and one teacher in college that were super important. But yeah, another reason, in picking Cornell, when I went to campus, it was just so beautiful, and they had a great outdoor education program. And at the time, transitioning from kind of high school into college, I was starting to get into hiking and rock climbing and stuff like that. It was in a place of the world that you could do that. I mean, I took ice climbing and kayaking for PE in college, stuff like that. And
Things
then
could be worse.
Yeah, and then I spent 100 days in the wilderness, like as part of this.
Not one of those like isolated situations.
Yeah, it was a group. It's called National Outdoor Leadership School. So I spent. It was probably,
That's pretty badass.
Yeah, mostly in group settings.
I would go camping with you because I would feel safe.
Yeah,
David, I would go camping with, but he's like a New Yorker, and I'd be like,
David camps at the Four Seasons.
I don't know. Well, I don't know about the Four Seasons. Christy camps at the Four Seasons.
Exactly.
I don't know about David.
But I do. And just to be clear about that, I don't know if that's a topic of conversation here, but I'll make it one. My whole leadership style, and to this day, is based on those 100 days in the wilderness. And
so, in what way? Like, what words come to mind when you're thinking of that?
So it was in group settings. It was a group of 12, but you break down into camp groups of 3 or 4. And in that camp group, so there was a thing called expedition behavior. And expedition behavior, there's probably some lengthy explanation. But at the end of the day, it's just do your shit and be a good person. Do the right thing, right? So, and if you didn't, it's super transparent. Whereas kind of in the business world, and
you can hide behind someone else.
You can hide behind.
You can't if you're rock climbing.
Yeah, let me give you a good example. So like in the desert, when you get to, we did a 25 or 30 day section, what was canyoneering, and you were kind of going through the desert. And when you'd hike all day in this group of 3 for whatever, 8 to 15 miles, you get to camp. And when you got to camp, one person had the job of setting up the shelter, one person had the job of finding water, and one person had the job of cooking your meal. Right?
Did they assign it, or you got to choose?
No, you'd switch off kind of every day. So this is like your tent group, right? So if one of those people didn't do their job, you either wouldn't drink, you wouldn't eat, or you wouldn't sleep well, right? Yeah. So it was pretty transparent. And just to be frank, I was one of those guys. When I wanted to step up, when I was interested in a project, I would go all out. But if I wasn't, I would totally loaf it. But what I realized is if I was mailing it in, someone else was picking it up, and that's kind of not fair. So I've taken that. I kind of took some of those lessons to post that Knowles experience, to be like, yeah, just do what you got to do.
Yeah,
right?
And take accountability.
Yeah,
I like that. You talked about doing investment banking, being in the real estate industry, working in hedge funds. Tell me a little bit about those experiences and how those prepared you for being a CEO of a scaling, well-funded business. Are there cultures that you loved that you said, I want to emulate this?
Let me cover the first part of your question. I still think to this day that having that hardcore technical investment banking experience is critical to what I do. And by the
To
way,
what many people do.
yeah,
That's a great foundation
or
for
consulting, or something where
it's rigorous.
It's rigorous in a couple different ways. One is it's okay to like sleep under, like to have that. I mean, the millennials today, don't get beaten up. We got beaten up, and that was okay. That was
Yeah.
shaping, and you know
That's
what?
part of it.
And part of it was I never want to do this again. But I put in some time, right?
Mhm.
But the second part of that is acquiring those technical skills of income statement, balance sheet, cash flow reconciliation, understanding true finance, understanding how to really put together a presentation and then deliver that presentation. Those things, and yeah, it's concentrated, and yeah, you're spending a lot of time, and some of it's kind of BS time. But at the end of the day, a lot of that time is just kind of those foundational skills. Now, what I'll say is what differentiates going forward is not the hard skills. It's the soft skills, and it's the ability to connect, to negotiate, to manage, to set culture. All of those things are much more important as you advance in your career.
Right. Otherwise, you'd be an analyst.
Yeah, you'd be an analyst. But
Yeah.
but to say that you know how to do that and to be able to
That's incredible.
talk the language and to be able to point out or fact check even one thing with your team, to be like, well, he actually knows this shit, I think is a
Has that
really,
happened?
yeah, it happens all the time
Yeah.
in the language, and
When it
being
keeps
able
people
to-
on their game because they're like, Chad actually knows.
yeah, when I talk to bankers, I mean, having been a banker, we talk to investment bankers all the time. You there's a different level of credibility if you're
For sure.
talking about acquisition and comps and public company comps and how and discounted cash flow and how a business is valued. You just get another layer of credibility that you've kind of been there, done that.
And how many of those people that were in your investment banking class kind of stayed that course?
Very few, very few. It's really, really tough to come through the system and be a kind of a long, kind of a career investment banker.
And
the
be
ones that
married,
are
and stay married.
and stay married. But I will say the ones that are the career investment banker, I would say that same lesson applies. So I'm fortunate to go to a bunch of different summits and conferences. One interesting one is one of the kind of the best ones is the Goldman Sachs Builders and Innovators Conference. And you see the top people at a Goldman Sachs, they're differentiated and they're in that room. I mean, they know the hard skills,
Yeah.
but the people that are in that room are unbelievably charismatic people. And so I would say it applies in every industry. It's the soft skills that wind up differentiating over time.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I have none of those other skills, so I'll have a job in a year.
But you
So
have
that's good.
unbelievable EQ.
Good. Yeah, that helps. And so you did the investment banking thing, which I would say absolutely I agree, or consulting would be a great foundation for anyone. And hopefully one of my kids will go that route, because I used to place people in those jobs in New York, and not many of them were that happy because of the work
Yeah.
load. But gosh, they were smart. I mean, a whole nother level of, like what you said. I mean, it's a great foundation. You learned there because you weren't leading teams there, right?
No, I wasn't leading teams, but I had a couple incredible mentors there. That
Was that a formalized thing or just?
No, it wasn't formalized. I was at this firm called Wasserstein Perella, which was kind of popularized in the 80s from the RJR Nabisco takeover. There was a couple of like great mentors. We were actually in the San Francisco office doing high-tech M&A, so we were looking at all the kind of internet and search engines as kind of the internet was getting off the ground in the mid-90s. So it was a really exciting time, and we were this satellite office, so a lot of the rules from New York kind of didn't really apply, and we had this kind of rising star.
Were you working
there.
market hours?
I wasn't working. I was there
you were
market
working at
hours.
6 a.m.?
I'd get in probably at 8 or 9, but we would stay till midnight or 1 or later every night.
Oh, jeez.
Every night. I remember I had this fellow associate there named Andrew Donner, and one day we got out at like 10 o'clock and it was still light out. And we're like, what do we do? Right?
You don't have to do it yourself. So we started to talk about culture, which I know is your passion, really. But when you work for companies that are outside of your industry, I mean, do you see a common thread among companies that you admire and the culture that they've set?
Yeah, I do. Well, first of all, every culture is different, and culture is I say culture is top down and bottom up. So first and foremost, you have to have a cultural leader, and that should be the CEO, who sets the tone of what you want this company to be, how you want people to act,
How they should feel.
Why they're there, right? What the mission is and what the values are. And I don't mean, and we actually do have corporate values, but
It's crucial. I mean, it sounds, I know you're kind of like, ugh, it's like cliche,
yeah,
but it's crucial because then you know what you're measuring against
yeah,
and what you're looking for when you're hiring talent.
yeah. And by the way, culture grows. I don't think there's kind of born CEOs that know how to do everything. You learn over time, and
Right.
you actually learn about culture over time, what works and doesn't work, how you want to lead, how you want to set culture. So when I say culture is top down and bottom up, I want to kind of set a general overall tone and have this grand mission, and people be there in our case because we actually want to change medicine, and we're working on something that will be an innovative company, not just in biotech, but we want to be an innovative company overall, and we want to be compared to the disruptive, game-changing companies kind of across the board. To do that, you need to kind of hire for the right mindset and the right type of person, and you want to set a tone. And great ideas. There's no monopoly on great ideas coming from the executive team. You want to encourage that open debate. You want to encourage thoughts to come from different parts of the organization, and that voices be heard, and that you have a collaboration across different function of the business. We've instituted this emerging leaders program, where we put together cross-functional teams offsite, up at my happy place in Suncadia, and we it's for two things. One is we want to see how people work together and across the folks they normally work with on a day-to-day basis, and two, it's an opportunity for me to see who can communicate and present their ideas,
Who's
and who's
emerging,
right?
Yeah.
And
But before you started Adaptive, I'm totally interrupting you because I want to go back. I've never actually asked you this. Do you remember where you were when Harlan called to say, I have this great idea?
I actually remember exactly where I was sitting. I was in my home office in Chicago. He called me and said, "Hey, Chad, I had a pretty big discovery. I think it could change the world. I've been talking about it in academic circles, and I've been kind of mobbed with interest. I think in order for it to impact patients, it has to become a business. I have no idea how to do it. I'm calling you because you're the only person I know in business." I said, "Well, thanks. That's
lucky me."
Yeah, that's resounding. So he said, "I figured out how to sequence T cell receptors at high throughput. Do you want to start a business?" And so first of all, I was like, "Yeah, I'm in." And then then I was like,
What's a T cell?
I have no idea what he's talking about. I had to go to Wikipedia and start a crash course, when you follow all the links, and gosh, there's a lot of links in science, right?
Yeah.
So I'm doing a crash course on the immune system and immune system receptors and all this stuff. But I knew, I'll tell you how I knew that he wasn't crying wolf, and it was a big discovery. First of all, as I mentioned, this is probably now
2008?
This is 2009 when I got the call. So there's probably, I've been calling him for 20 years, being like, "Come on, dude, you're really smart. How do we make money off of you?" Right? I'm a total capitalist, and I'm not ashamed of that. And I've been asking my brother to discover something. I'm like, "You got something?" And he would always be like, "I have no interest in starting a business." Literally,
That's
he had
so
no
interesting.
interest whatsoever. He had no interest
And
in
maybe he
business.
hadn't discovered something worth calling you about.
That's certainly true. He hadn't, and I think that recognition that it needed to be a business, and that, hey, I only know one guy, because he'd been so disconnected from that world, right? His circles really didn't include people in the business world other than a few of his friends, but he wasn't great at keeping up with relationships anyway. So he was really ingrained in that kind of academic circles. So no exposure. So he calls me up and says he wants to start this business for, we actually coined this term called immunosequencing, which is now,
That's huge.
Now it's popularized, but
Yeah.
what we did was, we used the advances in next generation sequencing hardware and to develop chemistry and informatics on top of that to profile your immune system.
You have to explain it like you're explaining it to Layla, my who you're
Well,
like little baby Layla, my 8-year-old.
yeah, well, she's smarter than
Because
most of us. So,
she's got the EQ. Explain that and where it was then and where it is today, and take me through that real quick.
yeah. So,
Layla.
so first of all, your immune system's job is to scan anything foreign, and then react to it, kill it, and remember it.
Okay, Uncle
essentially.
Chatty.
So that's essentially what it does, and it does this through this really neat mechanism where your DNA actually rearranges on the surface of these immune cells to form these receptors. And think of these receptors as these scanners or barcode scanners, and they look for a match, which is a pathogen or something foreign that comes in your body, a virus, bacteria, et cetera, and they're looking for this match. And when they find this match, you have kind of this reaction or this immune cascade. First, they expand. They go through what's called a clonal expansion, but meaning this one match makes many copies of itself. And then certain of these receptors go in and kill the bad thing. Then they remember it. And so you've got this memory in your immune system. And so what we did essentially is had a set of chemistry, what they call primers, that lay down on the genome. And from each one of these cells, we can pick out this genetic rearrangement. And we can do this in a quantitative fashion. So we know how many copies of each different type of receptor are in any kind of sample that we take at any given time. So in a sense, we can profile your immune system and tell kind of what's in your immune system at any one time. And so we can apply this to many different areas. It's this kind of really massive platform that applies to both how doctors treat patients. It can inform their treatment decisions on a specific patient, and it can also assist in how therapies are developed. In particular, we're starting in cancer, but it's such a large area is because your immune system is involved in almost every disease state, whether it be cancer, infectious disease, or autoimmune disorders. And also what we call treatment modalities. So how a patient gets treated, whether it be kind of in cancer, like transplantation, cancer immunotherapy, vaccines, we can measure the response to those therapeutics and monitor that response over time.
So that's next level. I mean, incredible. And so when will you say kind of like, oh, we've arrived? And I don't mean, oh, we're going to have some sort of acquisition or go public or something like that. But at what point are you like, we solved it, we're done? Like,
yeah,
our job is done.
Sure. Well, the job, so first of all, the job won't be done in the immune system because the immune system applies, because it applies to so many different, cancer itself is so many different diseases. Even in autoimmune, there's so many different autoimmune disorders. And even within a particular autoimmune disorder, pick lupus, it's not very well understood. There's unlimited applications of the platform technology, but your question is, when will you do some big stuff, right? Like when will you actually help some people or help some drug companies discover
Well, and
drugs?
also you've got the other parts of the business too that I am curious about.
Sure.
And that Layla's curious about.
So let's come back to some of the other parts. But so the first and foremost thing is we recently got clearance from the FDA on our first diagnostic product called clonoSEQ for measuring minimal residual disease in blood cancer. So what does that mean from a layman's perspective is that we can determine first response to therapy. Did the drug work or not? Did it knock down that cancer clone? And then secondarily, is that cancer clone coming back? So we can tell at a molecular level before clinical presentation. So before you walk into a doctor with all these symptoms, we can tell in kind of your molecular information whether that cancer is coming back.
How can people access that?
It's already on the market now. We're doing kind of our official commercial launch at the American Society of Hematology in December. And we are waiting on, we're working through Medicare reimbursement. So getting paid for getting paid for tests in the diagnostics industry, it's challenging because
it's also huge.
It's huge, yes.
What are you like most looking forward to in this next 3 to 6 months in the business?
I'm anticipating that we'll be able to share more information on how our technology applies to therapeutics, in particular cancer. It's something that we've been building and working on the platform technology for the last 3 to 4 years, and we've just rolled out. And I anticipate that we will do this in partnership with some very established large biotech and pharma companies that focus on in these different areas, in particular in cancer. The technology itself, I've been talking about how we kind of sequence the immune receptor, but then we've had some innovation that not only sequences the receptor, but we can also determine what pathogens those receptors are binding to. And again, we can do that at scale. And so this is also the basis for our landmark partnership with Microsoft.
Yeah, the Microsoft partnership was super exciting. That's incredible. And so how are you spending your time today versus in 2009? And what are you losing sleep over?
Today, I spent a lot of time on, I'll call the broad category of people.
Relationships?
Yes, relationships, business development relationships, but even within the company, I spend it on trying to get the right talent in the right places, so recruiting, but also getting people to work together better or providing the resources.
Do you like that part? Do you like the managing of people, or are you more like the recruiting of people?
I like both. I try to simplify a CEO's job into really three categories: money, people, strategy. Right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have money, you can't get the right people, and if you don't have the right people, it doesn't matter what strategy you set. You need the people to effectuate the strategy. So it's very simple, and it's taken me a while to get there. So what do I spend my time on? I spend my time on those three things.
Yeah.
And probably in that order. First and foremost, my job is to make sure the company is capitalized and that we have...
Well, you are well capitalized, 400 plus million.
Yeah, some of that went out for an acquisition, and we spend money. I mean, biotech's a capital-intensive industry.
Did you enjoy that process, the fundraising process?
I love it. I mean,
You're probably great at it.
Yeah, I mean, people,
people complain about it, but
complain
I can see
about
you loving
fundraising
it.
being a burden. I love fundraising because I get to talk to.
But you also have a great story to tell, and that's got to be fun. You're not talking about something boring. You're talking about changing the world, and you're good at it, and you're building relationships with people that are relatable. It checks every box, I would imagine, for you.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I mean, that's exactly right. And I've developed some amazing relationships with our investors. Our biggest investor, I consider a thought partner.
Yeah.
He actually believed in us early on. A guy named Brian Kaufman from Viking Global. We were closing up a Series C round, and he came in and said, "Hey guys, if this is what we think it is, you're going to need more capital," and went a lot bigger. And has been an incredible thought partner and kind of backer of management, not kind of unconditionally, but really helping think through problems. We've had a couple examples of that. So I like going out and talking and telling our story, and meeting new people and understanding what they're investing in. That's the fun part for me.
You talked a little bit about culture fit, which is a slippery slope. Lately, that's been a big hot topic in recruiting, is to not say culture fit. And I've been saying culture fit for 20 plus years, because people talk about how that can lead to bias. So instead they say talk about attributes. So are you clear, Chad, on what attributes someone should possess in order to be successful at Adaptive?
Yeah, I think there's some common attributes, such as the ability to debate openly and communicate your ideas. And at the end of the day, I mean, this might be too colloquial, but it's just be cool.
No assholes.
I was joking around with my CFO, who we're close with, about.
If anyone's going to be an asshole, it's going to be me.
No, it was like, hey, can we have part of our core value, or don't be a shitbag, right? Because that's true. Just be kind, be kind, be cool. Help people out, work collaboratively, try to give credit as opposed to taking credit. But we also want culture to be organic and to flourish up. A lot of programs that we provide resources for, but that have flourished that I probably wouldn't participate in, or I never would have thought of, such as kind of lunchtime lectures where people present the research papers of the day. We've these really esoteric, nerdy game nights where people play, these board games that, we have a lot of super smart people. And we do, we also do kind of the traditional happy hours, and we have a gym.
And you guys do a Blitter Ride together.
Yeah, we had 129 people.
Yeah, and how much did you raise this year?
I don't, something like 80. $80,000.
Time to step it up. You did like over $100,000 a couple of years
Well,
ago.
that's when you were partnered with us and before it dropped out. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but my butt hurts on those bikes. I can't ride anymore. I prefer to ride a spin bike. I'm
Yes.
scared. I'm an old lady now.
Send a proxy.
Maybe I'll go. Maybe I'll do it this year. But no, I think you've done an incredible job of that, and you've got a lot of stability. You don't have a lot of turnover.
No, we don't, and we provide. We do cool stuff. I mean, we have like a stand-up arcade game room. We have a Adaptifit, which are branded gym with showers and locker rooms and trainers.
That's actually a super cool gym.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I try to work out there. It's embarrassing though because we have boot camp with a trainer, and my brother and I'll do it, and it's always packed. There'll be like 20 people, and I'm definitely on the tail end of the fitness craze there. I'm holding up the rear when we go outside and do the stairs.
I don't buy that at all. I've seen you run stairs. I can't do that. And so you said that you spent a lot of time on strategy, people, and money.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're organizing your day, do you feel like you're good at time management? Do you have any hacks I can learn from you?
Well, my time management is a lot better now because I have an unbelievable assistant who really helps me and keeps me in line. One thing that we didn't touch on that it kind of goes in kind of this time management and one of the things that I guess one of my strengths is I have the ability to process a lot of information simultaneously and synthesize it and also compartmentalize. I can move kind of quickly from one thing to the other and then come back to the other thing without having it take over. So if I go from one meeting to the next or one call to the next, I can really focus on that call and then kind of come back to and pick up what I was working on before.
That's a skill.
Yeah.
That's a total skill. But do you have any tools or hacks that you can share for things that help you stay on task and stay efficient?
In reality, I'm kind of old school. Yes, I'm addicted to my iPhone. And some of it is just hours. My wife probably hates me for this attribute, but I sleep like through very, very little and checking my phone all night long. But
and is that because you're stressed?
Interesting. So some of it's because of stress, and some of it's because of excitement. Right? It's not.
It's a good stress.
Yeah, we have a lot of good stresses, but just it's a roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of it has just been because of stress, and there's also, as you mentioned, good stress, and then there's just some really tough challenges that we had to deal with, which I would call are just ugly bad stress.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is I'm old school, and my time management is that I have a person now that can manage my time for me. And
that's huge. And so where have you failed? Not necessarily at Adaptive, just in general, because we all learn from our failures.
So this goes back to, every...
Don't say I didn't get picked on the softball team in like third grade. You can lay down for this part.
I think the biggest failure goes back to what we were talking about is with people. Not spending enough time in the vetting process to bring people on. You recognize pretty early on if someone isn't the right fit for your culture, and it's easier said than done. So
but you're all heart too. I mean, you're a head guy, but you're a softie at the core. You're a teddy bear, and I'm sure it's very difficult for you to let someone go, even though it's like slow to hire, fast to fire is the right approach.
Yeah, and
it's
that's
harder to do.
Yeah, I think that's easier said than done, but it's 100% true. And I think you get better at it over time.
Like,
and I think
you're fired.
Yeah. I think that is probably the biggest mistakes. And one of the things, we've always had this conviction to our core that we truly have a platform business. And there aren't that many true platforms, and we've known it. And we've stuck to our guns, and we've had some battles with board and investors, and like really to say, well, okay, you guys need to focus on one. And I do believe in focus, but I believe that for us, the focus is on kind of the core technology and then resourcing the right applications in the right way with the right people, the right capital, the right prioritizations, and then you can prosecute your multiple opportunities to get at the same time if done right. You have to be smart about that, and we have had tremendous conviction around it. I don't think I think I've made mistakes or failed in my ability to communicate that up until recently. So I think that's, I don't know if you want to call it failure, but certainly a learning lesson.
And so how do you decompress?
Exercise, I hike. Yeah, and I spend time with my lovely wife, Christy, who
I love too.
Yes.
My girl.
And she's been really an amazing kind of rock for me. I mean, with as much craziness and kind of the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur in this business. I mean, she's always had the attitude of unconditional belief in me and that things will work out. And that is, such a blessing to have. It's super appreciated by me. I think it's underappreciated in the world how important that is to have that kind of, because this really is
that's a job.
It's a partnership.
Yeah, it's
right?
a partnership.
It's a partnership, and
Yeah.
for me that, and in our home it doesn't work for everyone, but kind of that distinction and delineation of roles and duties kind of really works.
Well, she's a master at it too. She's a master CEO of the home. So what would you say is fueling you right now in your personal life, outside of Adaptive and outside of Christy and the girls?
Right now I'm reading this book called What School Should Be, and we just kind of moved my youngest daughter to a new school that's representative of a lot of the kind of values and tenets and teaching of this book. So I've just recently become kind of more involved in kind of education and how people learn, teaching you how to think, not what to think, and experiential education, and things of this nature. So I don't know, that's been kind of an
I would love to learn what you're learning, because I had an experience like that in middle school at a private school. I had experiential learning, and I learned best like that. And it's always a question of like, are we giving our kids the best possible learning experience? Not just are you going to get into a great school, but do you have a thirst for knowledge and interest in knowledge?
Yeah. And I think if you remember back, you had a memory, but if you asked everyone kind of what were the most impactful learning experiences, they're not going to say, well, studying, the Civil War or whatever. They're going to talk about an experience they've had.
Maybe they acted out the Civil War.
Yeah.
Right. Those are memories for me in learning.
So, and then separately, I'm on a few different boards.
What are the boards that you're on right now?
The only nonprofit board I'm on is Life Science Washington, which is a trade association for the biotech and medical fields within the state of Washington. And I just joined the executive board of that. I'm on the board of a company called Pavia, which is a SaaS-based company for horizontal infrastructure inspection and verification. So roadways, bridges, and tunnels instead of going out with paper and pencil.
This is the hottest thing you've ever said. Like, bridges, tunnels.
So
George is also another baller.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the point. Is on the surface of it, this business doesn't sound sexy, but it's super interesting to me understanding what SaaS models are. How infrastructure. I mean, if you look at the infrastructure, roadways, bridges, and tunnels. I mean, this is a massive industry. And then I'm a co-founder and chair of a company in the endovascular repair surgery for abdominal aortic aneurysms, AAA. I'm big on this concept of convergence, when you're combining disciplines from different industries to move a field forward. Yeah. And so this combines kind of software, 3D printing, and kind of traditional CAT scans into creating a device that is much better to repair an aorta in surgery. And unfortunately moved next to Dr. Starnes, who's kind of the foremost key opinion leader in the world in this space, and had another great discovery, which I just helped commercialize. Just to be clear, I spend, as a proportion of my time outside of Adaptive, is like 99% of my time.
Because you're working a ton right now, and you're doubling down on this, as you should be, and the world will be a better place because of it. So everyone is grateful. I'm speaking on behalf of everyone. So now you're in a position where you've got this $400 million in funding. Adaptive's got all sorts of momentum, and it could change your life financially. Could put you in a position where you're raising your kids in a different situation, or maybe slightly similar to how you were raised. But I find it challenging to, especially in today's day and age, to give the kids grit that you have. How do you do that?
Well, it's a great question, but some of that grit you're born with, right? And it doesn't. I mean, some of that is just it's innate, inherent, and then some of that you have to kind of keep the checks and balances in. So, the kids need to. I want my kids to work. Like I worked growing up. I mean,
it's so much more challenging now. I feel. I'm sure our parents said that to their parents,
right?
But I find it challenging. My kids are like,
Yeah.
everything seems like a big
Right.
to do, and it's like, really,
right. But I mentioned this before, but like we had this thing in our house: with privilege comes responsibility, and if you want to do certain things, well, at least contribute, earn some money. Like I mowed lawns. I was a waiter at a pizza place, not a very good one.
David worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken. That's so awesome.
He should have saved the outfit. He probably did.
Oh yeah.
But no, it's hard. I do think it's hard, but it's the values they see. Like you got to see how your parents treat people too. It's like if my kids ever used a position of privilege to treat anyone different, there are certain things that I would go absolutely ballistic about. And so they see their parents treat people right. They see us like at the end of the day, yeah. Hopefully this is a double bottom line. We'll help the world, and we'll also do really well financially. As I mentioned, I'm a capitalist. I want to make money. I want to make my investors money. But at the end of the day, they also see me working pretty hard.
And you're doing a great job for the people who are listening. They're incredible kids, but it's hard to keep them on that path and to keep them driven.
Absolutely. I mean, again, I think a lot of that drive for kids is, self motivation. Obviously, they need the right kind of tutelage and watering and care. But at the end of the day, kids have a certain innate abilities and sense and drive that some have it and some don't. And you can nurture it. But I don't think you're gonna give a kid drive.
You can't change them.
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna change them. So
yeah, no, it's absolutely true. And so, 2 final questions. If you had a free Saturday to yourself with no obligations for work or family, how would you personally spend your time?
First of all, you mentioned what fuels me earlier, and I said people. So yes, sometimes I like to decompress and have some alone time, but it doesn't even excite me to have a full free day alone. By like 3 hours,
we're like off the charts extroverts. That's why.
like 2 hours into it, after I worked out or hiked or skied, which I'd love to do, I'd be like calling people to be like, hey, you want to ski with me or hike with me? Like it doesn't excite me to have a full.
So I don't necessarily mean by yourself.
Yeah.
Literally,
Yeah.
I just mean it's an open canvas to create your day.
Yeah.
Are you in a city? Are you at a beach?
No, I'm definitely outside. And I guess I have great days walking around New York City, but when I think of kind of the times I'm happiest, it's somewhere when I'm like on a super long hike, an amazing ski day.
Yeah.
Something of that nature. That's
something
to me,
physical and something outside.
Yeah, something physical and something outside for sure.
I like that. And so the final thing is, what is the legacy, Chad, that you hope to leave your family and the planet?
Yeah, first and foremost, I hope people can say I was a great husband, father, and friend. And then secondly, that we truly had an impact on the world from what was created from, a few people, that we grew into something that had such a profound impact on how, patients are managed and how drugs are discovered. That would be really, really cool.
Yeah, it would be incredible. I'm so grateful that you did this, and I might make you do it again. This is super fun, and yay. Thank you for listening to the What Fuels You podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, and follow us on social media to keep up with the latest news and episodes. You can also contact us at podcast@fueltalent.com to provide feedback, ask questions, and share topics or guests you would like us to cover in the future. We hope you feel inspired by our guests and that we have helped fuel your day. Join us next time for another episode of What Fuels You.